That match point did not just end a game. It shattered a historical barrier that Philippine tennis had waited decades to break. But before Eala made the greatest players in the world bow their heads on the 2026 hardcourts, nobody believed a girl from Southeast Asia could survive at this brutal level. The stadium was completely deafening. You could feel the concrete vibrating under your feet as she hit that final inside-out forehand winner. It was a 95-mile-per-hour laser that left a multiple-time Grand Slam champion frozen on the baseline. For the millions of Filipinos watching around the world, this was not just a tennis victory. It was the ultimate validation, a moment of pure national pride exploding onto the global stage. We finally arrived. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing a mixture of sheer disbelief and pure adrenaline. The commentators were screaming her name over the broadcast, their voices cracking with raw emotion. She had just done the impossible. She had taken down a titan of the sport in straight sets, dismantling a game plan that had terrorized the tour for years. The internet completely broke. Social media feeds in Manila, Los Angeles, and everywhere in between were flooded with highlights of that single, definitive strike. People were crying in their living rooms. They were hugging total strangers in sports bars. It felt like the entire world had stopped spinning just to watch this young woman claim her throne. But the glowing lights of that 2026 victory hide a much darker reality. The journey to that single swing of the racket was built on years of crushing isolation and silent tears. To understand how massive this shockwave really is, we have to rewind the tape. We need to go back to the darkest days when this dream was supposed to shatter before it even truly began. People always look at the junior Grand Slam trophies. They see the shiny hardware from the Australian Open and the French Open. What they never see is the profound loneliness echoing in the background. Imagine being a young teenager thousands of miles away from home. You are stripped of your culture, your family dinners, your everyday comfort. Instead, you are dropped into the hyper-competitive pressure cooker of the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. Every single morning starts before the sun comes up. You run baseline, drills until your lungs burn and your hands literally bleed. You hit thousands of cross-court backhands until your muscles scream for mercy. You sit in empty hotel rooms staring at the ceiling while your friends back home are living normal teenage lives. But the physical pain is absolutely nothing compared to the invisible weight sitting on your shoulders. Alex was not just playing for a junior ranking. She was carrying the desperate hunger of an entire nation that craved a global sports icon. The Philippine fans watched her every single move. They analyzed every junior match with intense scrutiny. Every victory was celebrated like a national holiday, and every minor setback was debated on national television. That kind of pressure can easily crush a grown adult. For a teenager trying to figure out who she is, it is completely suffocating. You are isolated in a foreign country, surrounded by European prodigies who grew up playing on these exact clay and hard courts. You look around the locker room and realize you are physically smaller. You do not have the natural towering height of the Russian power, hitters, or the built-in muscle mass of the American serving machines. The physics of the game are inherently against you. You have to rely purely on grit, insane timing, and a relentless work ethic just to stay in the conversation. She handled it brilliantly on the junior circuit. She dominated girls, her own age, with a tactical mind that was light years ahead of her peers. She built a flawless resume that made everyone believe the transition to the big leagues would be a total cakewalk. The media painted her as the absolute chosen one. They wrote the fairy tale ending before she even stepped onto the main stage. They assumed her junior dominance would easily translate into professional titles. But stepping onto the professional WTA tour is a completely different universe. It is unforgiving. It is brutal. It does not care about your junior ranking or how many social media followers you have back home. The junior trophies mean absolutely nothing when you are staring down the barrel of a 120-mile-per-hour serve from a seasoned 28-year-old veteran who is playing to feed her family. The women on the pro tour hit the ball with a terrifying ferocity. The heavy topspin kicks up to your shoulders, forcing you off balance on every single rally. They exploit every tiny weakness without a shred of mercy. They do not give you free points. Alex had all the perfect momentum in the world. She had the backing of a legendary academy and the love of an entire country. But stepping out of the junior bubble and into the professional arena was about to expose a terrifying truth. Watching a young prodigy face the brutal reality of professional sports is always heartbreaking, because you know exactly how much they sacrifice just to get to that starting line. If you feel that same deep connection to underdog stories that redefine history, join our community right now by hitting subscribe so we can explore these incredible journeys together. The real test for Alex was just beginning. The transition from the junior circuit to the professional stage is not a step up. It is a brutal fall off a cliff. Suddenly, you are not playing against girls your own age anymore. You are facing grown women. These are formidable athletes with a decade of tour experience and terrifying destructive power. You step onto the court and realize the tennis ball sounds completely different coming off their rackets. It is heavier, it kicks higher, it violently forces you backward. For Alex, those early days on the main tour were a crushing reality check. We watched her struggle through grueling qualifying rounds in obscure cities far away from the flashing cameras and the glamorous stadiums. The fairy tale narrative from her junior days quickly evaporated into thin air. She was facing opponents ranked outside the top 200 who fought with a desperate and savage hunger. These women were fighting to pay their rent, and they showed absolutely no mercy to a teenage prodigy. The physical toll was absolute and undeniable. We saw her pushed far behind the baseline, just trying to survive the sheer velocity of the professional game. Her body language completely changed. The confident swagger of a junior Grand Slam champion was replaced by the anxious hesitation of a rookie lost in the woods. The tennis world can be incredibly toxic when a rising star begins to stall. Critics were hiding in every single corner. Analysts and online forums pointed fingers at her physical stature. They loudly claimed she lacked the raw, muscular power required to hit through the modern defensive specialists. They confidently stated her serve was too vulnerable to ever be effective at the highest level of the sport. Every single defeat was magnified under a cruel microscope. Every minor injury sparked endless debates about whether she was pushed too hard and too fast by her management. It truly felt like watching a brilliant flame slowly running out of oxygen. There is one specific match from that dark period that perfectly captures the agonizing depth of her struggle. It was a grueling three-set battle under sweltering, suffocating heat. She had fought her way to a commanding lead. She had the match entirely on her racket. And then her physical battery simply died. The heavier balls and the relentless punishing pace finally broke her down piece by piece. You could see the sheer, naked exhaustion in her eyes. The broadcast captured a deeply uncomfortable moment during the changeover that I will never forget. The microphone picked up the heavy and jagged sound of her breathing. She sat on the bench with a white towel draped completely over her head, hiding from the world. Her shoulders were shaking uncontrollably. It was a raw picture of total devastation. That single frame of footage haunted her loyal fans for months. It was the exact moment you realized she was just a kid carrying an impossible burden on her back. You felt a sickening knot in your stomach watching her pack her bags and walk off that court in complete silence. The aftermath of that loss was deafening. Her ranking began to slip dangerously low. The tournament wildcards dried up. She was sent back down to the grueling lower-tier tournaments to rebuild a completely shattered confidence. For almost an entire year, it felt like she was wandering alone in a dark wilderness. The pressure from back home in the Philippines transformed from excited anticipation into quiet, heartbreaking worry. People started wondering if she was destined to be just another cautionary tale of burned-out junior talent. That was when the light seemed to completely go out. But in the darkest night of that career, an entirely new weapon was being forged in absolute silence. But true champions never die in the dark. They use the darkness to reshape themselves. In that moment when she was pushed to the absolute brink, we no longer saw a terrified young talent. We saw an awakened warrior. The turning point did not happen with a grand announcement or a flashy press conference. It happened on a random Tuesday against a heavily favored top 20 opponent who was known for bullying younger players. Everyone expected a quick blowout. The commentators expected the veteran to overpower the young challenger within an hour. But something was fundamentally different about Alex that day. She walked onto the court with a cold and terrifying calmness. She was no longer playing just to survive the rally. She was playing to inflict maximum damage. You could see the exact moment the mental shift took over the match. It was late in the second set and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The veteran hit a massive, heavy topspin forehand deep into the corner, hoping to push Alex into the fence. The old version of Alex would have sliced a defensive ball, floating it high into the air and prayed for an unforced error. Not this time. By the way, I have to pause and ask you something right here. Have you ever had a moment in your own life where you just completely stopped being afraid of failing and decided to finally go on the attack against your obstacles? Tell me about that exact turning point down in the comments, because that mental flip is exactly what we are witnessing right now on this court. Instead of retreating, Alex took a giant, fearless step inside the baseline. She caught the ball incredibly early on the rise before it could jump up to her shoulders. She unleashed a flat down-the-line backhand that sounded like a gunshot. The ball painted the absolute edge of the corner before the opponent even had time to turn her head. It was absolute clinical perfection. The crowd physically gasped. The dynamic of the match flipped upside down in a fraction of a second. The veteran looked across the net and realized she was no longer hunting a scared rookie. She was trapped in a cage with a predator who had finally learned how to bite back. The tactical adjustment was nothing short of brilliant. Alex stopped trying to outmuscle the biggest hitters and started suffocating them with flawless timing. She used their own aggressive pace against them, the television. Production focused heavily on her footwork during this turning point. It was a masterclass in spatial awareness and aggressive positioning. She was moving with a violent intent that we had never seen before from her. Let us slow down the final point of that match to truly appreciate the genius of her evolution. The stadium went completely dead silent. You could only hear the heavy thumping heartbeat of the moment and the aggressive squeak of her shoes on the hard court. The tension was completely suffocating. The veteran tried to serve out. Why to exploit a perceived historical weakness in her return game? Alex anticipated the trajectory perfectly. She stepped directly into the court and crushed the return right at the feet of the server, leaving her completely paralyzed. It was a pure, unapologetic statement of dominance. The crowd erupted into a massive frenzy of pure joy. The commentators completely lost their minds on the live broadcast, screaming about the birth of a new era. That victory did not just change the score on the board, it permanently altered the trajectory of the career of Alex Eala, opening the door for the most spectacular takeover of the entire tour. After that explosive moment, the rest of the tour transformed into a historic performance stage. The biggest legends of world tennis walked onto the court with absolute confidence and walked off in total disbelief. The dominoes began to fall one by one in spectacular fashion. She took out the world number 7 in straight sets in Miami. She dismantled a former champion on the clay courts of Madrid just 3 weeks later. It was no longer a lucky streak. It was a systematic takeover of the highest tier of the sport. Every single match proved that her unique style was the perfect antidote to the modern power game. She did not try to hit the ball harder than the giant servers. She simply redirected their immense power into the empty corners of the court. Her time at the Elite Academy in Spain had taught her the absolute mastery of heavy spin and relentless defensive depth. When opponents tried to blast a winner past her, she absorbed the pace and sent the ball back with a frustrating dipping angle that landed right at their shoelaces. It completely broke their rhythm. It destroyed their mental game. The sheer frustration on the faces of these seasoned veterans was incredibly obvious on television. They were throwing their rackets in pure anger. They were yelling at their coaches in the stands. They simply could not figure out how to break through her solid wall of defense and counter-punching aggression. Let us look closely at how she neutralized the biggest servers on the tour. Normally, a tall power hitter dictates the entire match by winning quick free points. But Alex developed a supernatural ability to read the toss of the server. Before the ball even left their hand, she was already shifting her weight to the exact right spot. She stood closer to the baseline than anyone else dared to stand. She took the ball exceptionally early, depriving her opponents of the one thing they desperately needed: time. By rushing their recovery, she forced them into uncomfortable lunges and sloppy, unforced errors. Her footwork was a mesmerizing blur of calculated violence. She glided across the hard courts with the efficiency of a seasoned chess grandmaster, trapping her opponents in a web of unpredictable angles. Think about her iconic match against the reigning grass court champion during the critical hard court swing. Everyone predicted a total massacre. The champion hit flat, penetrating ground strokes that normally blew smaller players completely off the court. But Alex turned that match into a psychological torture chamber. She initiated long, grueling baseline rallies that tested the physical endurance of the champion. She threw high looping shots to disrupt the heavy pace and then suddenly injected terrifying speed straight down the line. It was a complete masterclass in controlled chaos. The massive crowd in the stadium grew completely silent as they watched the mighty champion slowly unravel. By the deciding third set, the legend was physically gasping for air, while Alex looked like she could easily play for another 3 hours. That was the exact moment the entire locker room realized the terrifying truth. Alex was not just surviving the tour, she was rapidly evolving to conquer it. But there is a specific secret behind this massive surge that the mainstream sports media completely missed. The cameras love to focus on her matchday intensity, but they do not see the invisible bloody work that built it. We actually dug deep and found an incredible detail from the academy coaching staff who witnessed her darkest days firsthand. The truth is absolutely chilling. During that brutal slump when everyone thought she was permanently broken, she refused to take a single day off to recover. After losing grueling three-set matches, she would not go back to the hotel to rest and cry. She would walk straight out to the remote practice courts under the blistering afternoon sun. She forced herself to hit 500 consecutive down-the-line backhands while wearing a heavily weighted training vest. If she missed the target by even a few inches, she started the entire count over from zero. It was a level of psychotic dedication that even the most elite coaches rarely witness in their entire careers. She was literally punishing her own body in the shadows to ensure she would never feel that suffocating helplessness on a main stage ever again. That insane, unseen work ethic is the rock-solid foundation of her absolute dominance. When her name lit up the most prestigious leaderboards in the world, it was no longer just the victory of a single isolated individual. Tonight in Manila, there are thousands of young kids holding heavily worn rackets in tiny concrete courts. When they look at Alex, they do not just see a tennis player defeating living legends on a television screen. They see a brilliant reflection of their own infinite potential. For generations, the tennis establishment built a towering psychological wall around the sport. The unwritten rule was always that you needed a massive physical frame and an elite Western tennis background to conquer the grand stages. A player from Southeast Asia was historically supposed to be a polite participant, not a dominant global conqueror. Alex took that archaic rulebook and completely set it on fire for the whole world to see. She proved that geographic origin and physical stature mean absolutely nothing when measured against unparalleled grit and tactical genius. She has become a massive cultural icon who carries the blazing pride of millions of people who have waited their entire lives to see their flag fly at the absolute summit of this aristocratic sport. Her victory is a powerful defining statement of a rival for an entire region. The landscape of global tennis has been permanently altered by her sheer force of will. She proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that history is never completely written in advance by the experts or the odds makers. It is violently seized by those who simply refuse to surrender to the darkness when everything goes wrong. She conquered the elite ranks and sent a massive, undeniable shockwave through the locker room of every single major tournament on the calendar. She exposed the vulnerabilities of the established elite and created a brand new blueprint for success on the professional tour. But this incredible journey is far from over. The real question right now is how the rest of the tennis world will desperately attempt to counter her brilliant tactical evolution. What exact limits do you think she will shatter next when the massive pressure of the upcoming Grand Slam season finally hits? Make sure you are subscribed right now so you do not miss the answer when we break down her next historic milestone in our upcoming deep dive.